Today I want to talk about how I believe that we've been in a beast system since the death of Christ and the fall of the Hebrew Israelites in 70 AD, and how the Pope, King Charles, and the leading banking families are of Satan and claim to own the souls of all of the beings that live and are a part of the Commonwealth, which are owned by the Pope through the England's banking system and enforced through the navies of the countries of the Commonwealth that the Pope uses as his own private army. And it's all being done with one document. And that document is called Unam Sanctam. This is about to be a very hard pill to swallow, but I promise you all, it's the truth. I'm going to come to you with nothing but facts, and I'm going to back it up with Google to show you how they don't even hide it. It's the fact that we have to look for this information. So remember that siege that happened in Jerusalem in 70 AD that I was talking about earlier? Well, that gets talked about a lot, but people fail to realize that there went on to be 8 more sieges after. See, these sieges was to push the so-called black people out of the land to make way for the new people who was trying to take over. I feel this doesn't get brought up a lot because they just changed the name from sieges to crusade. You see, the Crusaders would get together and they would have a siege on a land that they were trying to do this to. This is a siege right here. You see here, siege warfare during the Crusades. They were doing sieges, but they were the Crusaders, right? The 8th siege ended in 1270 AD. And just 32 years after all of that pillaging and robbing and raping, the Pope took all of his spoils of war and claimed them as his own, and took his vast money and land that he gained through doing all of these sieges and through these crusades. He took it and created this document called Unam Sanctam. And Unam Sanctam was the first Express Trust ever created. And that trust is broken down into 3 parts. The 3 parts are broken up into 3 sets of documents called papal bulls. And a papal bull is a type of public decree, letter, patents, or charter issued by the Pope of the Catholic Church. It is named after the landing seal. And the first papal bull that he used to start exerting that power of that Express Trust was Romanus Pontifex. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it was established in 1455. This papal bull gave the Pope ownership over all of the real estate in the world that he had conquered during the pillages of the siege. The second Express Trust that he used, the papal bull that he used from that trust was Artenae Regis. Again, I don't know if I'm saying these right, but it was established in 1480. This gave the Pope the power that said that he owned the land, so he must own all of the people that are on the land that he conquered. So with this trust, he says that he owns every person that is a part of the Commonwealth. Now, before the third papal bull was created, a very key event happened that is called the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus, right? Which is a lie, but it happened in 1492. 2 years after that, Christopher Columbus came back to the people who funded his adventure, the Portuguese Empire, which were doing something very sneaky on the other side of the world during this time, but we'll get into that. But yeah, 2 years after he came back, the Treaty of Tordesillas, again, I'm bad with these words, but this was signed in 1494, just 2 years after he so-called discovered America. And it said that Portugal divided the newly discovered lands outside of Europe between Portugal Empire and the Spanish Empire crown along the Mediterranean. This was basically giving the Pope ownership over the newly found Americas, all of them, South and North America, even though it was people already living in the land. And this document is about to get brought up again later. So again, all of this fell under the jurisdiction of the Pope. So with all of this new land and all of these new people that was believing in something other than the Pope's rule, he had to do something about it. So then he sent colonizers over to the Americas to, make them, bring them over to the faith and to believe in Jesus through the way that they were teaching. I also find it very funny that for the definition for the word colonizer, for the example sentence, it says Portugal was a major colonizer in both Brazil and parts of Africa. North Africa, like what they did to the Moors too. And this is where the third paper bull comes into play. And it was created to basically own our souls. The first two was to take the property in our physical bodies. And this third one was to take our souls, because it was convocation. It was convocation. It was baptisms. They made us get baptized in the faith of Satan. The reason the Pope did all of this was to take away the land and the entire world away from the Israelites, because they failed to mention that King David and King Solomon literally ruled the entire world from the land of Israel. Like how the United States basically rules the world now, King Solomon and King David did that from Israel back. See, King David did it through the banking system, and that's where they get it from. But they are perverting the way that it's being done, because the wickedness of these people is the kingdom of hell mimics the kingdom of heaven. They don't tell us how King David and King Solomon set up embassies all around the world, and that the Israelites were all around the world, not just in Israel. And that these sieges and these wars from the Native Americans and the Moors and all of these conflicts in the world were the Israelites being pushed out of power from their embassies and where they were located all around the world. Because after the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Jews were no longer able to call themselves Jews. They had took up the term more and became Christians and Muslims. But they always carried who they truly were on their backs until they came back into power. And the Moors came back into power in 70 AD. And they ruled for over 800 years. But when they first got there in 70 AD, is it a coincidence that the Crusades started 300 years later? And their kingdom and empire flourished all the way up until 1492. There go that day. Because in January 2nd, 1492 is when this Moorish king relinquished the keys to the Moorish empire to who? King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. And where did they? They were the kings and queens of the Spanish Empire. Yeah, it was them who teamed up with the Portugal Empire, who was doing what they was doing to the Native Americans at this exact same time, where all of this came full circle. Them taking the Native Americans and the Moors out of their positions of power at the exact same time. It's starting to look like this has all been done to harass the true children of Israel. And by the year 1502, the Spanish crown had ordered all of the Moors to either convert to modern day Christianity or to get out of the land. So that's when the Moors had decided, after this treaty, which was in 1990, was in 1494, they chose to leave. And they chose to leave in 1501 AD, which was the 16th century, right? The 16th century, the Moors came to where? They came to the Americas. They know this history. I feel it was an underlying war that was just not being really specified or talked about, because it was masked under deception and compartmentalization of events that it was also just had the hand of the Pope. I know I didn't say that word right, but it was also just had the hand of the Pope. It was so that we never saw the Pope, never saw his hand in all of these. I know that was a lot and there's more, but I got a part 2 coming that's going to go heavy into what happened next. So catch me in part 2. Okay, I'm back with part 2 talking about this document, Unam Sanctam, right? I last left off talking about how the Moors left Spain in 1501 AD because of what was happening to the Moors and the Native Americans at the same time, because of one document, and that document was the Treaty of Tortoletas. Again, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this treaty was the Pope taking over not only the Americas, both South and North America, but the Moors territories in Spain. So in 1501, the Moors decided to leave Spain and fled to North America, because if they fled to South America, they would have just fell under the persecution that was already going on because of this document after Christopher Columbus said that he discovered America in 1492. So Moors left and fled to North America, but they fled to go be with family, because the 10 lost tribes in Israel were never lost. They were the Native American Indians that the so-called Moors came to America to find to be with family, because they all knew that they were the children of Israel. The Moors were just the children of Israel from the tribes Benjamin, Judah, and Levi. And the rest of the 10 tribes had already been in America since 500 BC. And that was under the Assyrian captivity, but that's a whole nother story, and I'll get into that in another video. So is it a coincidence that the Moors were pushed out of Spain during the years 1492 through 1609, and the first slave voyages started in 1526 AD, right? And it said that they was carried off from Africa. But again, remember what I was telling you all, what happened during this time. The Moors had just lost their power, and where were they located? In Spain, in North Africa, and they was fleeing the land, right? They were fleeing. And where they failed to leave out right here is that the main slavery was taking part in South America. They was removing people at an alarming rate from South America during this time. And the Moors were leaving Spain, coming to North America, trying to dodge it all. And again, the Moors was officially expelled from Spain in 1609. So remember though, the slave trade in America officially started when it was 1619, just 10 years after the Moors were expelled from Spain and were coming to the Americas. They had been coming to the Americas for over 100 years. So it was just them hunting them down to where they had fled to. So was that the reason that no slave boats were ever found? Because the reason people were coming from North Africa over to the United States were the Moors coming willingly on their own ships? See, now this is starting to look very crazy and very, it just makes sense. And through all of these acts, through that one document, all of the Moors, their land, their estates, and even their souls on paper belong to the Pope. And through these acts, and after accumulating all of the people and all of their wealth and all of their buildings, they wanted to build off of it. They wanted to establish their own nation. So they used these funds to create another business. And that business was the production of money. See, the money we use isn't true money, right? The money we use today is based off of slave labor. And the business that they used to develop that is called the East and West Indian Company. See, the East Indian Company was established in 1600, December 31st, 1600. It was the English company formed from the exploration of trade from East and Southeast Asia and India, which is very crazy when you get into finding out that America might be the true Israel. But we'll get into that in another set of videos. Let's stay on Unam Sanctam. So it was a trading company that traded what, right? First of all, it says that it was established again in December 31st, and it was a monopoly, right? It started out as a complete monopoly of trading between the Americas and that side of the world. But not only that, it was a trading company, right? They traded in spices, right? It also traded in cotton, silk, indigo, saltpeter, and tea, and transported slaves. Crazy how they didn't want to highlight that part of it, right? Yeah, they the ones who had the boats that the slaves were transported on during the slave trade. And this company, the East and West India Company, went on to become BlackRock. You don't believe? Yeah. Yeah, this shit gets really, really deep, and how it all comes full circle about the blacks really being the true children of Israel. Now, the East and West Indian Company didn't start shipping slaves until 1684, and well, at least on their books, right? Because slavery was going on, like I showed you, in the 1500s. What was it? In the 1520s. And the reason they wasn't doing it officially, legally into this year, because it wasn't legal. It wasn't legal. It was illegal to human traffic, right? But they had to legalize. But in 1666, the KSUV accounts were created. And again, this just stemmed from Unam Sanctam. This just stemmed from the power from the Pope. And what is KSUV? KSUV is French for he who lives. It is a legal term for an individual who is the beneficiary of a trust or an insurance policy with rights to property and the income and profits that the property provides. And during the Black Plague and the Great Fires of London, Parliament enacted this in 1666 to subjugate the rights of men and women, meaning all were declared dead, lost at sea. The government took custody of everybody and their property into a trust, which is Unam Sanctam. I need y'all to get with me. So all of those men, women, doctors, lawyers, builders, and children were all taken custody by the government and their property, all into a trust. Unam Sanctam. And in slavery, you had to have a pass, right? You had to have a pass to go from master, from your slave master to go out of state or to go to another plantation or something like that. Is that the birth certificates? Is that the passports? You see, the people are the money. It's not back gold. Many Americans are unaware that the role Wall Street played in the slave trade, and that enslaved people built the wall, which Wall Street was named. Ironically, enslaved people built the wall to protect Dutch settlers from the raids from the indigenous people of the country. And those indigenous people were the Native Americans trying to free their people, were the Moors trying to free their people. In the entire stock market, the New York Stock Exchange was the beginning of the stock market. It was based off of Wall Street from slavery. I'm running out of time. I really wish that I had longer than these 10-minute videos, but I promise y'all I'm going to be quicker with part 3, and I'm going to try to make that the final part. And now I'm going to go into the American Revolution and all the way up into current day, how it's affecting the financial system today. And I'm not someone who just comes with the problem. I'm going to come to you all with the solution, and how do we get out of this? How do we get out of their jurisdiction? So yeah, I hope to see you guys in part 3. Peace. What's up, you guys? I'm back with part 3 of Unam Sanctam, the document that the Pope is using to run the world. It consists of 3 documents that initially gives him power over the land, the property, and even the souls of the people of all of the Commonwealth of the world. Last we left off, I was talking about how the Moors came over to America and how the Pope, through the Crusades, followed them over here and initially started the slave trade with the Moors and the Native Americans. You have to understand that the slavery started in 1619 with the Native Americans and the Moors going into slavery to the Europeans. And the East and West Indian Company had a total monopoly over trading through the seas at this time. So it wasn't that all nations was really trading with America. It was literally just a monopoly with the Pope. And business was good for them for almost 100 years, just about, right? All the way up until a very key event that happened in the Americas, that they totally corrupt the total understanding of. But I'm about to get into that. And that was the Revolutionary War, which happened in 1775, which was, I believe, over 100 years after the East and West Indian Company was officially trading slaves on their book. And what was the American Revolutionary War fought for, right? The American Revolutionary War was fought in April 19, 1975 to September 3rd, 1783, also known as the Revolutionary War. It was for America's independence, right? It was America's independence. But the Moors were already in the Americas. The Moors were the Native American Indians. Remember, I was telling you that they are family. They all are the children of Israel. And the Revolutionary War was fought over the Moors gaining their freedom back from Spain and Portugal, right? But that was all a mask to hide what the Pope was really doing. They was all doing this for the Pope through Unam Sanctam. This is why they don't like to talk about the first 10 presidents. The person who led us during the Revolutionary War was John Hanson. And they also tell you that John Hanson was a black Moor. John Hanson was the first president of the United States of America. He was the person who led the American Revolution. You think I'm lying? It says here that he became the key Revolutionary War financier, militia raiser, and arms agent. He did everything for this nation, and he was a Moor. The first 10 presidents were Moors. They are lying about the history of this land. And in 1781, he went on to sign the Articles of Confederation in 1781 in Maryland and joined the other states ratifying them. In November 1781, he was elected the first president of the Confederation Congress, sometimes styled President of the United States in Congress Assembly, followed ratifications of the Articles. He was the first president. So after the Moors had gained their freedom and gained back control over the United States during this time after the Revolutionary War, they instituted the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and all of those things which get their authority from God. We have to understand these documents were for the Moors to exert their power from God. But under Abraham Lincoln, just another 100 years later, everything fell apart. The bankers took back over the United States for the Pope through Abraham Lincoln's term. The Jewish bankers took over the national banking system and created the Office of Comptrollers of the Currencies and to regulate it and to supervise it, which is currently today the Federal Reserve through the National Currency Act of 1863. So I'm going to go a little more in depth about this because this is what changed everything. This is what not only made the Moors slaves, but made everyone in the world a slave to the Pope. Now, Abraham Lincoln started his career in March 4th, 1861, and he was murdered in April 5th, 1865. This 4 years was some of the most important years that ever happened in the United States or in the world, because what was going on during this time. This is the link between the Seminole Wars and the Civil War. 3 conflicts between the United States and the Seminole Indians of Florida in the period before the American Civil War that ultimately resulted in the opening of the Seminole desirable lands for white exploitation and settlement. This all was the same conflict that they are hiding, that they don't want us to know that the Moors and the Native American Indians were working together to free themselves from these white people. So, Abraham Lincoln's decision to fight rather than to let the southern states secede was not based on his feelings towards slavery. Rather, he felt it was his sacred duty as President of the United States to preserve the Union at all costs. Why are they framing it like that? Because the slaves were already free, basically, after the Revolutionary War. They was just forcing these people out who was already trying to keep the slaves. These wars, the Seminole Wars, the Civil War, were all fought trying to push them out after they had already came together and ratified, the Moors and the Native Americans, the Native American Indians, to ratify themselves against the Pope, against Unam Sanctam. But the way that Abraham Lincoln went funding himself to fund the Civil War was very dumb, because he just ran to the bankers, not understanding that the Jewish bankers were also working for the Pope. He thought that they were separate, and they came how they always come, smiling, but he got bamboozled. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a pawn of the Rothschilds. He thought that they were working separate from the Pope, not understanding that they were working right in tandem with him. So he thought that he was pushing out the Pope through stopping slavery, but he just weaseled his way in through the financial system. He took over the financial system using the Jewish bankers. So then on February 25th, 1863, President Lincoln signed the National Currency Act into law. The act established the office of the comptrollers, I don't know if I'm saying that right, of the currency, the OCC, and charged with the responsibility of organizing and administrating a system of nationally chartering banks and the uniform national currency. And who did Abraham Lincoln put in charge of the OCC? Hugh McCulloch, right? This bastard right here. Yeah, Hugh McCulloch, he was the first comptroller of the currency. He took office in 1863, distinguished American. He funded the Civil War because Abraham Lincoln ran to the Jewish bankers. He ran the Bank of Indiana during this time. And this gets into how I believe that the Midwest of the Americas is the true land of Israel, but I get into that in another video. And the killer part is that Abraham Lincoln created all this because he was trying to stop paper money from being made. But this is what these bastards went on to do. I know that I said that I was going to try to finish this up in just 3 parts, but it's just so much information, and I want you all to really understand all of the moving parts, and so that the Pope has nowhere to hide in this understanding, so that we know exactly what's going on. It's time for us to rise up in our understanding on how we got in this situation. And again, I'm not someone who's just going to tell you all the problem. I promise to get to the solution. I wish I can just bypass all of this to just tell you how to, but it would be a disservice if I don't really get you all to understand how we are in this situation, so that you can truly understand how to get out of it. I hope to see you all in part 4. Peace. Okay, you guys, I'm back with part 4 of Unam Sanctam, the document that the Pope is using to own everyone's soul in the Commonwealth. The last place that we left off was the creation of the OCC by the National Currency Act, which was used to give the power of the United States over to the Jewish banker. Abraham Lincoln didn't understand that the Rothschilds and the other Jewish bankers were working in tandem with the Pope in order to take over control of the United States, back for the Pope for Unam Sanctam. And again, this act was created in 1863. Now, literally, just 1 year later, Abraham Lincoln realized what happened. And when he realized what happened, he literally vowed against the Catholic Church, against the Pope, because he realized that he had unwillingly given over control back over to him. So he vowed that he was going to rectify his mistake. And literally 1 year after he vowed against the Pope, he was dead. He was assassinated. But I want you guys to read what they say. John Wilkes Booth was part of a family who celebrated actors, but he is remembered as the assassin who mortally wounded U.S. President Abraham Lincoln in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. on April 14, 1865, as a part of a broader conspiracy. What was that broader conspiracy? The broader conspiracy that they're talking about is the Pope's hand, is that the Pope may have had a hand to deal with his assassination. You don't believe me? Watch. See, this was the greater conspiracy. It was the Catholic Church. I was never told this when I was in school, that it was potentially the Pope who had him killed. But when you go into it, it was all over Unam Sanctam. So with Abraham Lincoln out of the way, the OCC was free to do its will. This is when lobbying started in the United States, because the Jewish bankers through the OCC started buying off politicians, right? So for 8 years, the OCC began to rob the public and had enough power to create another company, and that company was called the District of Columbia. See, the original District of Columbia was created in 1801 as a federal district of the United States, and it was supposed to be used as a headquarters for the government, and that was its original purpose, right? And I know you can barely see, but up here it says District of Columbia before 1871, and that's going to be important. Why does it say before 1871? Because in 1871, the District of Columbia Organic Act was created. And this is an act that happened by Congress, and it repealed the individual charters of the cities of Washington and Georgetown and established a new territorial government for the whole District of Columbia through Congress. Repealed the territorial government in 1874. The legislation was the first to create a single municipal government for the district. Basically, what they are saying is that they got rid of the 3 branches of government within Washington and Georgetown, right, where Washington, D.C. is, and they put in a new government because an influx of free slaves was moving to this area. So they used martial law that was still going on in the land to wipe out the United States government, and in place put the District of Columbia, and this is the District of Columbia that we know today. But when you go to the District of Columbia Act, the District of Columbia before 1871, and you scroll down to the Organic Act, it tells you outright, the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871 created a new single district corporation. It's a corporation. It is a company. It is no longer a government. This new corporation is governing the entire federal territory called the District of Columbia, thus dissolving the 3 major political subdivisions of the District of Port of Georgetown, the city of Washington, and Washington County, and their governments. Basically, what this is all saying is that the 3 major political governments is the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. It got rid of all of those and put in place this new district, this new District of Columbia. And when you go on to read down here, you find out it was because of the free slaves that started moving into this area. They used the martial law that was still going on through Abraham Lincoln in order to enact this. And so this new government is not backed by the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. It just brings us back under the jurisdiction of Unam Sanctam, the Pope. I need you all to really understand this fact. And just 42 years later, the OCC created the Federal Reserve in 1913. It tells you right here, it was the passage of the Federal Reserve Act. The OCC did this, and all this is that the OCC is the Federal Reserve. This is just them splitting up their power so that we don't realize who is really running the show. But the OCC is the Federal Reserve. It created it. It stems from it. They are tied together by the Board of Governors headquartered at Washington, D.C. Who are they? This is the hidden government that is really running everything at the District of Columbia through the act that I just showed you. Now we are in debt to the federal government, but it's not that we indebted by money. We are indebted to them by the fact that we are the money, and that our slave labor pays for funds and ventures of the poor. That's why the United States pays for everything. Like how we was paying for the UN when Trump had exposed that, how the United States was paying for most of the money there. The EU, the Ukrainian war, the war that's going on in Israel right now. The Federal Reserve, the OCC, is paying for all of this through Unam Sanctam, through our slave labor. It's not money. It's not physical money. It's our physical bodies that is paying for all of this. The United States is the slave place of the world. This is Babylon. I need you all to hear what I'm saying. This is all just the Pope and the banking families, the Jewish banking families, who not even the real Jews. They are all harassing the true children of Israel. And now at this point, not even just them, everybody on the earth. And that brings me to the IRS, because the IRS is just the police for the Federal Reserve. And they just enforce the codes and statutes that was created that aren't laws, because there hasn't been, again, a single law passed since 1871, since this new fictitious corporation took over the government. And the reason why I say that these codes and these statutes aren't law or anything like that, because there hasn't been a true legislative branch to pass any of these laws. The legislative branch was dissolved in 1871, as I just showed you. I know this is a lot of information, and I'm finna have to go back a little bit to Abraham Lincoln's term, so you all can really grasp the understanding of everything that took place to get to this point about the martial law that happened. But I'm going to get into that in part 5. I hope to see you guys there. Peace. Hey, you guys, I'm back with part 5 of Unam Sanctam, the document that the Pope is using to own everyone's soul in the Commonwealth today. So the last we left off was, I was talking about the IRS and how they was created to be the police for the Federal Reserve, and that they just enforce all of these illegal codes and statutes because they aren't true laws, because there hasn't been a true legislative branch to create a real law since 1871. So now I want to dive a little bit back into President Lincoln's term, because we really have to understand about the martial law that he had declared. So, September 25th, 1862, Lincoln subjected protesters to martial law and the suspension of habeas corpus, right? So he enacted martial law to suspend habeas corpus. So let's find out what habeas corpus. Let me move my big head out the way. So habeas corpus, a writ requiring a person under arrest to be brought before a judge or into court, especially to secure the person's release unless lawful grounds are shown for their detention, right? So let me show you what this means in contrary to the Constitution, what it means in the Constitution. So habeas corpus is a part of Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, right? And it is a great writ of habeas corpus, is a fundamental right in the Constitution that protects against unlawful and undefined imprisonment. So this was the protection that you wasn't going to get imprisoned for no reason or without a fair trial. He suspended this, and it's never been reenacted. So let's find out what the definition of martial law is. So martial law involves the temporary substitution of military authority for civilian rule and is usually invoked in times of war, rebellion, or national disaster. When martial law is in effect, the military commander of an area or country has unlimited authority to make the enforced laws. This was never overturned after Abraham Lincoln. So we all are on the same page, right? In 1862, Abraham Lincoln enacted martial law and the suspension of habeas corpus. And habeas corpus was the right to a fair trial. And martial law suspends the government through military action. The United States has never gotten out of martial law since this happened, because the original 3 branches of the government haven't been in place to rectify this because of the creation of the OCC and the newly formed Washington, D.C. or District of Columbia or Unam Sanctam. There hasn't been a true law since 1871, since all of the governments dissolved themselves and gave power over to the District of Columbia. And the District of Columbia is just a fictitious company that has its own government and its own executive branch. See, this is why the presidents be able to write all of these executive orders, because it's not the president writing these executive orders. It's the mayor of the District of Columbia writing these executive orders, because it's only an executive branch in the District of Columbia. It's not a legislative or a judicial branch. It's just an executive branch. They are over everything through the military. See, the Organic Act of 1871 was one of the most corrupt things that the government has ever did. The legislative branch, which Article 1 of the Constitution gives them the power to pass law, they used that power to create the District of Columbia. And again, how did they do that? It was through the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871. So I want to read through this again because it's something that I want to go through with you all. So it says the District of Columbia Act of 1871 is an act of Congress, right? It was Congress, the legislative branch, that repealed the individual charters of the cities of Washington, Georgetown, and established new territorial government for the whole District of Columbia. But let's focus on this, right? What are charters? What does charter mean, right? Because this word has been brought up in all of these parts that I've told you all, right? So let's find out what are these charters that they keep switching over powers to, right? What does charter mean? Charter, a written grant by a country's legislative or sovereign power. So the legislative branch is our sovereign power? So, by which a body such as a company, college, or city is founded and its rights and privileges defined. A town received a charter from the emperor. The things that they are trading in the banks, look at any bank, they tell you they have charters. Whose charters? Because they try to make it seem like our birth certificates are on the stock market. They're charters. It's our sovereignty. It's the people. The people are this money. Okay, this is the Wikipedia page for charter. A charter is a grant or authority or right stating that the grantor formally recognizes the prerogative of the recipient to exercise the rights specified. It is explicit that the grantor retains superiority or sovereignty and that the recipient emits a limit or inferior status within the relationship. So they are trying to say that this whole sovereignty movement is BS, but literally that's what the charters are. Our charters are birth certificates. Birth certificates are charters. You don't believe? Just search is charters, birth certificates, and it tells you a charter is an implicitly birth certificate issued by all the states. This one's just Tennessee, but if you keep going, it's going to tell you all the other states. It's insane when you find out this terminology and what they're doing. So, who did the legislative branch sign over all of our sovereignty to? Huh? Because that's what it said in the Organic Act, right? That they signed over the charters. It was our charters. They signed it over to the OCC, to the Jewish banking families. And what they did is they went and they took it and put it into the OCC, or what then became the Federal Reserve, that prints money out of thin air. Because the money ain't the money. The paper ain't the money. It's the people. They own the people now. And they make liens and they give out loans against those people. And they have to pay back interest. And here's the Wikipedia page to the OCC, and it tells you it is an independent bureau within the United States Department of Treasury. So it's an independent bureau within the United States Department of Treasury. Oh, it's independent, right? Right, because it's the Jewish bankers. That was established by the National Currency Act of when? 1863, and serves to charters. It's the first thing. It served to charters, y'all. It's our birth certificates. It regulates and supervises all the national banks. Because why? Why do they supervise all the national banks? It's because all of the banks use our charters. This is the finesse that they are doing. And it's disgusting what they have done just with time to not only just the children of Israel, but even to their own people at this point. It's very disgusting and evil. It's pure evil. You can't tell me that's not the devil. So the legislative branch signed over our three branches of government and our sovereignty over to the bankers. And on the Wikipedia page for the District of Columbia Act of 1871, it tells you that they did the act in 1871, and they did it through Congress, but it wasn't until 1874 that this legislation went out through the entire United States, through to the rest of the 50 countries, and that it was the first municipal government. See, these municipal townships and governments and courthouses, they're not lawful. They're not real. They might as well be a part of make-believe land, because they only get their power from our consent, because they own our sovereignty. You guys, you really have to study this and understand that you have to create a trust. You have to create a trust and put your birth certificates in your own trust. And I'm going to go deeper into that in part 5. And it's crazy. I'm finding out, like, man, I'm probably going to have to make like way more than just probably even more than 10 parts to get all this information out, because I want you guys totally and fully educated on why you have to get these things done. I hope to see you guys back in part 6. Peace.